a good question. Her question, for those who didn't hear, was whether, because we cannot know anything for certain, that whether we can know God for certain. I got that correct, right? Okay. To that question, and this might be a controversial answer, I don't think there is, and not a physical certainty. There is no certainty we can have knowing that there is a God. I think you can present every piece of evidence, every artifact from the Bible or anything. A common argument for the truth of Christianity is how, sort of like compared to a telephone game, that all the manuscripts we have that are copies of the Bible are all the same, and you would think if they were simply fabricated by man that that there would be some discrepancies, that it's all the same. We have more copies of the Bible than we do of Plato and Aristotle. I think you can present every truth, show the place where Jesus was being questioned by Pilate, and yet there's still you still have to take that leap of faith. You can have all the evidence, but it still takes okay, I'm going to trust that if I fall forward, you're going to catch me, kind of idea behind it. That I don't think we can be certain that that there is a God, not from a reason standpoint. And I think that sort of gets into the material, immaterial. Partially also one of the things I realize is that reason, science, what we see, what we can theorize can only get you so far, even if we experience things. And it's aside from just because we cannot be certain if what we're seeing is actually how things are. It even just comes down to the fact that our own understanding is so limited, and I don't think that I have the faith to believe that the world we live in, the galaxy, the universe, everything that is as simple as something I can come up with in my own head. Just for the reason that I can learn, you learn something new every day. If it was as easy as I think about it and therefore that's how it is, I don't think learning new things would be as integral. That, or I'd simply be able to figure out everything about everybody and everything simply by thinking about it harder. I just don't think that's the case. I hope that answers your question in a sort of roundabout way. Yes?
My question is a little bit like that, but a bit more general. So you talk in your paper very theoretically in philosophy and how we should nurture it and all that sort of thing. Now my question is, you say that philosophies tend to be a little bit rigid, and we have discussions to help with that. And of course, there's still the possibility that we may not have philosophy.
Right.
So in a practical sense, what is the relationship between our worldview and our action? How can we apply possibly a false worldview to the action of this?
I think the most simple and at the same time somewhat controversial, sort of hot button, possibly applicable answer to that, I think it was the first one that sort of came to mind to me, was the issue of segregation back in the 60s. That there were enough people that believed that black people were subhuman, that they carried disease, all these different things that we consider now as, oh, that's crazy. But we grew up, we have spent long enough thinking, learning something different, what is the truth about it. I think that sort of exemplifies the extent things can go, because from that understanding of black people, they implemented laws that were subhuman. it was atrocious. A lot of the things that happened as a result of just that thought. That's one example, and maybe a more extreme example. Even if we think of Hitler's extermination of the Jews and the indoctrination that came from that, and the thousands, if not millions, of people that believed that Jews were the scum of the earth and all that led to so many deaths in the Holocaust, and consequently, or also the deaths that came because of World War II. Thoughts don't always have as drastic of consequences, but they can, and there's that potential of it. I hope that answers your question as far as can thoughts have, or can a philosophy have that sort of, can it have an impact? I'm not sure.
So, well, given that, how should we act on that? If we know that our worldview can have such drastic repercussions, how do we then convince others of the worldview that we are just certain laws? Or how do we act on our own worldview if there's always the possibility that it could be wrong?
There's always a possibility of being wrong. I think I don't think that necessarily means not to, because we aren't certain. We'll never be certain, and we wouldn't go about doing anything if we were afraid of possibly harming someone with spreading whatever belief we had that might be wrong. I think that, like a lot of things, requires some risk that you might indoctrinate someone in a wrong belief, but there should still be a sort of not a lack of certainty, the willingness to question, even in a moment of certainty. And that doesn't necessarily mean question completely to the point of pausing, to the point of hesitancy, a lack of resolve, but it's still at least a fraction of one's subconscious, a fraction of an idea of there is a slight chance that what I'm thinking might be wrong. And it's not going to work every time as far as that you're going to get it right just because you're questioning, but it prevents some degree of harm, I think. You will at least be at least advancing some, I think. Oh dear. Should have paid attention to that. Hope that answers your question.
One more question?
Oh boy. Yeah, I'm just gonna Dawson.
Thank you. I enjoyed your speaker. So at the ending, you talk about obviously we need to understand the standard, and through philosophy we can get closer to absolute truth. So you need to not have such concrete philosophies as we usually do. So I was confused in midway through about when you were talking about Don Quixote and saying, comparing him, and you're saying he doesn't have a philosophy. So how does not having his example of not having a philosophy fit into the role of finding truth? If people need to improve their philosophy, but some people don't have a philosophy, from what you said.
I think that is, if I'm understanding correctly, how does Don Quixote fit into the people who have a bit? I don't think it's as common that people don't have a philosophy. I don't necessarily know if it's if it's that in any case that there isn't someone with no philosophy, that subsequently makes everybody the one that that knows something to be true but then doesn't act on it. But the examples provided were, I mean, aside from just being the two characters in the story, I wanted to present a contrast, two extremes, because up until that point, I'd been talking about philosophy as a sort, like, from the perspective that we're going to understand something and it's going to be automatically correct. I might even go as far as to say that a certain area of a given philosophy, not necessarily philosophy as a whole, might not be developed, that we don't have a philosophy in a certain aspect, maybe not as from a complete, from like our complete philosophy doesn't exist. And same goes with that we know something to be true, but we don't accept it. That wouldn't be our philosophy as a whole, at least hopefully not. But it's a certain aspect. It's just those two, Don Quixote and Sancho Panza, both exemplify the type that we're the whole thing. It's a sort of exaggerated view, and I don't know if that's what Cervantes was intending, but they illustrate a sort of extreme and exaggerated example of those two, I think, to make a point, and partially also because the things that they get into are humorous. I hope that answers your question.
So you would say, even though you said Don Quixote doesn't have a philosophy, that everyone really does have a philosophy, and he was just an extreme example?
I think so. Yeah, I wouldn't go as far as to say that there are. I'd imagine there are some, but there aren't many people whose complete philosophy is non-existent, that it is subject to whim, to fit the circumstances. I think it comes down to what portion is, and even as I said before with Sancho Panza, that there are, again, people who don't believe everything wrong and they just don't choose to accept it. I'm sure there are some aspects of it that are correct, but then there are some. It's almost a course of action. Is it that we choose not to have a philosophy in a given area because we don't know, or is it that we know what the right thing is but it's inconvenient, or it's detrimental to our way of life to not accept it? I don't know. I don't think it's necessarily a tangible lack of presence or a false presence.
Thank you very much, Mr. Acuna. All right, and just a moment, we're going to have our next presenter come up, who is of special connection to me. However, the sun has come out, and I think a number of you would probably like to move to where you are not in the sun. So if you're in the sun, you'd like to move, we have areas under the tarps. They have lots of shady area back here, and so this is a good time to reposition.
And I will say, it wasn't a complete.
Hey, good job. That's so good. Andre, awesome. You have a great presenter. I know, you presented very well.
Presenting and great.
Hey, where's my hug?
I don't know if I want to sit right behind the period. Yeah, we have other stuff there.
I don't know if I agree.
I can move back over there behind the. Yeah. That's.